few weeks ago, I wrote something to the effect, if a superpower were planting the seeds of its own decline,
Yeah.
right, it would paralyze the global economy with the certainty of uncertainty. It would erode confidence in the reserve status of the dollar. It would discard due process. It would defund scientific and medical research. It would sabotage advanced chip making, and it would grow the deficit until debt service becomes the largest expense in the federal budget.
Mhm.
And that is America in 2025 under Donald Trump. But I feel like we're in a dangerous place.
So what do you do as a lawmaker? You're a Democrat, you're a lawmaker. In theory, you're in the arena. What role can you play to get us out of this?
Well, first we have to. I mean, I have to resist. So take Medicaid. There's no congressional district in America that has a greater stake in Medicaid than mine. 67% of my congressional district is enrolled in Medicaid. In my district, more than 70% of children, more than 80% of nursing home residents, more than 90% of baby deliveries are covered by Medicaid. And so I have to spend much of my political capital fighting this unprecedented assault on the social safety net upon which the Bronx is heavily, heavily dependent. The largest employer in the Bronx is the Montefiore Health System, which employs tens of thousands of people and depends heavily on Medicaid. And Medicaid matters not only to districts like mine, but to blue states and red states, urban communities, and
Well,
rural
you saw
communities.
Josh Hawley, Republican senator from Missouri. He's well aware of the majority of his constituents love Medicaid or rely on it.
And it's, Medicaid is not only health insurance for the lowest income, it has become long-term care for the elderly and the disabled and
Ritchie,
the chronically ill.
both my grandmother and my wife's grandmother, the end of life care that they needed, we couldn't have afforded without the help of Medicaid. Both instances.
I feel Medicaid is every bit as vital to senior citizens as Medicare. Like in New York State, the elderly and the disabled account for 20% of the enrollees, but make up 60% of the expenses. And so an attack on Medicaid is ultimately an attack on the elderly and the disabled.
Right.
And that's the case we're making.
Do you take any? So the way they're writing this bill, and guys like Chip Roy are unhappy with it. It feels as if all of the potential cuts to Medicaid or reforms, whichever side of the aisle you want to be on this, don't kick in for a few years, which means it feels as if they're going to get their hamburger today, they'll pay for it down the road, and by the time down the road comes, there'll probably be a different Congress that makes sure those either work requirements don't kick in or those cuts don't kick in. Do you think do you take any sort of solace in the fact that that's probably what this legislation may end up looking like?
It's not clear, and the only issue is not the legislation. So, under Donald Trump, 13.7 million people are in danger of losing their health care. So the Republican reconciliation bill could cause 8.6 million to lose their health care. But then you have the expiration of the Affordable Care Act's premium tax credits, which might cause 4.2 million people to lose their health care. And then there's a Trump regulation that could cause 1.8 million. So those numbers are staggering. That's comparable to the number of people who would have lost their health care during the initial attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act. So I do feel the impact will be felt. Republicans are going to message that their targets are not the elderly and the vulnerable.
Right.
It's undocumented immigrants or it's work requirements. But, it's deceptive. You're reducing money for the overall system, which will not only kill people's lives, but also livelihoods.
Right.
And the work requirements are essentially paperwork requirements. There's no evidence that work requirements lead to actual work. It simply causes people to lose their health insurance. So Arkansas was the first state to implement a work requirements program. It did not boost employment. It simply led 18,000 people to lose their health insurance in the first 5 months of the program. And the majority of those people were eligible for Medicaid.
Yeah. What is there can you split Medicaid eligibility between, say, children who are citizens versus maybe one parent who may not be?
I mean, I don't know how you could.
That's what
like
I'm
if
trying to
you're,
figure out. I don't know
if,
how you I get the thesis, but I don't know how you do it, and that's what I was curious.
look, if you are, eh, if you, a $715 billion defunding of Medicaid is going to reduce funding for every safety net hospital, for every hospital in America, which means less care for everyone, not simply for the population you're targeting. You're reducing funding for the overall system. And I also feel like we should be a compassionate society. If you're an undocumented immigrant and you have a heart attack, are the Republicans suggesting that you should not get emergency care and that care should not be covered by the federal government? Is that the kind of society that we want to live in, that we want people to be left to die because of their immigration status or because of their income? Like, the consequences of what they're proposing are barbaric.
So when you is there any, so you don't even see a feasible way of, even if you were trying to do this and say, well, children who are citizens are eligible for Medicaid, but their parents are not.
I do not buy that you can surgically target undocumented immigrants without destabilizing the overall system. I mean,
Mhm.
even today, we are underinvesting in long-term care. Right, there are 800,000 people on the waiting list for Medicaid-funded long-term care, and we're an aging society, so more and more people are going to be living longer and longer. Their healthcare needs will become more complex. The need for long-term care will rise over time. And most of the hospitals in places like New York are either teetering on the brink or underwater.
Ritchie, let me tell you on this long-term care, try, even if you think you can afford your own long-term care policy, you can't get one to sell you. My wife and I got our long-term care policies when we were in our early 30s. We're now in our 50s. Do you know how many times this insurance company has tried to buy us out? They're desperately trying to get us off their books. They don't want it. Now we got it because she lost her parents early in life, and it was more of a, hey, this is something that we were concerned about. But there's not even a marketplace for long-term care that's realistic. And I feel like government has been dropping the ball on this one for a long period of time. Now, I don't know what long-term care uh, government funded insurance looks like here. Do you have a thought? Do you have a blueprint in your head about how you would help to, because this is increasingly, people are my age, right? We've got kids in college and we've got aging parents, right? We're caught in this. Is there a realistic policy here that can help out? Is it all just through Medicaid, or is there something else?
I mean, Medicaid is what we have. It's inherently expensive. I mean, nursing homes are expensive. Assisted living is expensive. You know, I think we should be advocating for home care, allowing people to age at home and age in place.
Mhm.
But there's no escaping the problem in America is not that we're investing too much in long-term
Mhm.
care. The problem is that we're investing too little.
Look, I've got a grandmother. They staff. She's all there. She's physically just has to be in an assisted living facility, and she tells me all the time. She's like, "Yeah, they're always understaffed, especially on weekends. They never have enough staff, and this is universal. And so we have a healthcare worker shortage in this country as well."
Innovations like telehealth can make a
Mhm.
difference. So, I have a constituent who is caring for her father who has Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
and she would have to wake up 5 hours before his appointment in order to pick him up from his bed and bathe him and feed him and clothe him and then bring him down the stairs. Like, the process of bringing him to the hospital was arduous. And then telehealth was a game changer. Right? It allowed him to receive
Mhm.
medical care from the comfort of his own home. So there are innovations that can dramatically lower the cost of healthcare
Mhm.
and make it more personalized.